Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series finale of Nancy Drew. Great series finale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So obviously, not only is this being this beautiful conclusion and epilogue that it is, just a lot of interesting way to tie a lot of stuff in and just kind of resolving a lot of stories. Well, first and foremost, we're picking up in the aftermath of Callie doing what she did, which sucks that she got away and she's just able to kind of be out there, like, living her life after what she did. I hope at some point someone catches up to her, because it is that situation of, hey, she sacrificed, her family's done everything they can to make this town into what it is, and now it is a situation of, now that she's burned that bridge, there's no coming back to this town. Like, I don't know if she'd suffer any ramifications for what she did. At least, like, maybe, Chief Lovitz could make it seem like, right, at least she could be prosecuted because, like, oh, you actually, like, poisoned the town water in some capacity or whatever. Like, maybe, because they're, jumping ahead, the justification at the end, all of it was like, oh, there was mold in the water or something like that. Is kind of what made the town lose their mind. It's like, maybe you could put some of that on her, but, I mean, that's also the thing, like, she gets to start her life over, but her life has always been defined by her family legacy in Horseshoe Bay, and now that it's tarnished, and now she just, I was just hoping she'd kind of get her comeuppance, but I guess the best thing is maybe eventually she'll get caught, but also that she can never come back to Horseshoe Bay. Like, her legacy, her family legacy is done. Her attempt to kind of screw like, thought she had got one up on the town. It's like, no, they won out in the end, but still there was some issues in the end, but also the truth came out, and that's kind of what matters. So, so there's give and take with her. Like, there's a little bit of wins on her side, but there's losses on her side too, and I think the losses outweigh the win that she kind of got in some capacity. But either way, the plan is to use Tristan, like, basically, even though he's not the soul leader, he can't, like, do that many people at a time because he's got to do the entire town. The point is, like, they want to, like, supercharge, like, all the power inside of him as a soul eater and basically erupt it as, like, a supernova to kind of cleanse the entire town, who is going crazy. Even Red and Carson got caught by it. I even love the whole thing of, like, yes, everything Carson's doing is this because he's stressed about the baby situation, because Jean agreed, like, hey, we are going through with this, we're going to have the baby, so he's stressing about that. Red, her whole thing was, like, basically not really wanting to be pinned down to one place because she's all about adventure. She wanted Ryan to come along on this adventure with her, but for him, it's like, I've got roots here, I've got a life here, I don't want to leave behind. And so because she was kind of, no, I'll settle down, but secretly not really being 100% okay with it, ended up getting a whole bunch of suitcases, passports, and a whole bunch of neck pillows. It was like 9 neck pillows or something like that. So, all the while that's happening, George is also having to deal with the fact that her interview to get into the college she wants to go to is happening at the same time, and there's no, like, rescheduling that. So it's like a confluence of just everything coming together. Ace joins up. It's kind of wild where he's like, yeah, apparently this town has quite a, like, history with stealing bodies, so I kind of had to lock down the morgue. Connor's trying to, like, protect his wife's shop because, like, people are constantly stealing from him. He's trying to swing a bat at people, and Red and Carson were 2 people who stole from him. He's like, come on, like, they're I don't think he said antiques. He's like, they're, like, very valuable, they're very rare or something like that. He seems so defeated. I like that he's one of, like, the kind of recurring, like, characters that we see from time to time, that he made one final appearance in the episode. I do like that. But the plan to use the supercharged energy from Tristan didn't work because him and Nancy's souls are tied together. And now we finally get the resolution for it, because at first you're like, okay, so they're soulmates. That's why there's been this instant connection between them. And it goes back to what Nashua said when Nancy was inside her soul, being like, yeah, we walked this path before. So it's like, oh my God, which sucks, because obviously for Ace, it's like, all right, cool. They're bound together by souls, where our souls are basically, and our hearts are, cursed. So it's like 2 people in her life, like, are on opposite sides of the spectrum of, like, where they stand in, like, the grand schemes in this, like, cosmic connection to Nancy. Until we get the reveal that, nope, she's not, the reason why their souls are connected aren't because they're lovers, that, oh, she was Nashua's wife in a previous life. It's like, no, it's because they are kind of mortal enemies because they were bound together because Neshua used his wife's scissors to stab and kill the guy who started all of this, who was Nancy in a previous life. And that's gut-wrenching for Nancy, who's always tried to do the right thing. Like, yeah, she's kind of made some mistakes. The whole erasing a sin for Ace's sin was probably the biggest mistake she's ever really made. Because she's kind of, but it's like, there's small things where she's kind of made hiccups on and stuff like that, but she's always, like, done stuff with the best of intentions. And that ended up being this interesting conversation between Nick and Ace, where it's like, he's like, really? You can never forgive her? That's pretty harsh. Because it's like, yes, you can't judge someone for the mistake they made, like, when they were, like, in a very stressful situation. And especially when that person is willing to take on that mistake and try and learn from it and grow from it. It's like Nancy isn't, like, forgiving herself for it. You know who Nancy is. She's taking all that blame and that hurt and, like, she's, like, putting it inside of herself and trying to make the best out of it. So... And Ace was kind of like, do you really believe that? And he's like, I kind of have to, because he's like, I lived it, like making a mistake and kind of having that kind of be a part of you and doing everything you can to rectify it, especially for someone like Nancy, who once again has done nothing but do good her entire life. And for her, especially that whole conversation with Ace last episode where he's like, right, that pain is mine to, like, learn from and accept and grow from, but you kind of took that away from me. And now it's like, oh, like, now she finds out she's responsible for so much. Not only the reason, like, Nashua and eventually all the soul leaders of Horseshoe Bay, that guy also put out and let so many other places know how to make their own soul leaders. So for her, it's like, I'm not only responsible for Horseshoe, even though it's not me per se, it's still my soul. And even then, it's like, right, I'm the reason why, like, part of the great tragedy of this town is on my shoulders. And it's like, maybe that's why you became the person you became, because you are... done so much for, like, solving stuff in this town, because it's your way to kind of compensate for, like, your great sin on some level, And especially because it's like, for her, it's like, my sin doesn't start with Horseshoe Bay. Like, there are so many other sin eaters out there, other towns that have their sin eaters because of my past life. So that's actually what ties her and Tristan together. They were initially trying to find the body of Neshua's wife because they needed a piece of her to kind of help sever, because the whole Nancy and Tristan having this soul connection blocked the attempt to use him as a supernova, and because of that, they needed to sever that soulmate connection. And I mean, I guess there's different capacities of being soulmate, or at least your souls being intertwined rather than being soulmates. And so they ended up having to get her previous lives. I think they ended up getting, like, his rib or whatever. But it's interesting. They ended up finding out where his body was buried. And interestingly enough, at first, because I associate with, like, oh, isn't this the place Lucy died? It didn't even click in my head. I forgot. Right. It's also the place Nancy was born. It's like, the starting point for, like, a tragedy began with, like, another tragedy in some other capacity. I mean, who knows, like, if Nancy's other lives had it as rough. I mean, but it is that conversation that Tristan has with her later on, that it's like, right, every, like, new version of your soul has been becoming better and better and trying to make up for its past. Like, I mean, we don't really know what Nancy's other past selves were like. We got glimpses of them, I think, but we don't really know for sure. So, because I don't think it's all on Nancy. I think each subsequent soul has been trying to do good and trying to do better, I think, for this town. And because probably every one of her souls has been bound to this town. I think I'd wondered whether or not Home Dude, who started all this, I think I assumed he was going to be, like, a distant ancestor to, like, the, Ryan's family, like, is what I thought it was. I thought that was going to be, Nancy's family in that regard. I thought it was going to be, like, a distant ancestor on that side of things. I wasn't expecting it to be like, no, just purely like a reincarnate. I didn't associate, like, Home Dude with being Nancy reincarnated or something like that. There's a more direct connection in that capacity. Really bringing all the reincarnated soul thing back. I mean, especially considering, like, that played a massive part of the story last season with temperance and all that stuff. So, well, that was more generational, not even reincarnation, was it? Well, yes, kind of reincarnation. Well, because it dealt heavily with souls more rather than, I think, reincarnation. But either way. And obviously because of Ace's connection to Nancy, because of their curse, like while they're in that state to try and like sever like the connections between their souls, they basically have to burn away. But it's like you can't distinguish, they're too intertwined. Like Nancy's soul with Home Dude, who started all of this, their souls are indistinguishable. So she has to burn away the connection, but she can't burn away his soul inside of hers without burning away Nancy as well. So, but Ace is there because they're tied by this love curse, and because of that, he can always find her. All he has to do is follow that curse to her. So, when we saw it kind of working on Tristan, we did see, like, at the time, we could see the curse between Nancy and Ace was activated. So I'm like, okay, so will this end with that being burned away as well? And ultimately, it is the case. But Nancy, like, couldn't really, like, obviously it was damaging her soul, so she couldn't, like, leave. But if Ace came to get her, it meant it was damaging his soul. And that's a really sad aftermath of all of that. It's like, yeah, Nancy and Ace can never be reincarnated. This is their last lives, which is really sad because it's like you would want their souls to, like, that's actually a really depressing way to, like, storyline to end. But it also kind of, there's a beautiful Romeo and Juliet-esque tragedy to that, you know? Which, I mean, it's hard to, like, there's beauty in, like, right, this is the only life we get. Because at least on some level, like, there is reincarnated, which is sad because, like, right, each and every one of their friends can be reincarnated, but not them. This is the only lifetime they get. Because at least you could maybe think in another lifetime we'd find, like, this reminds me of, like, if you've never seen it, there's this great Korean drama called Bulgaso Immortal Souls. It revolves around, like, reincarnation, and this series finale is on the opposite spectrum and end of how that ended. No spoilers, but it's just, not really, but it's just, like, it is sad of, like, I don't know, that's where I kind of take away from the ending being kind of dark, where it's like, yeah, like, at least you can hope on some level that the Drew crew, like, reincarnates and meets each other again in some other life. But, I mean, you never know with reincarnation. They probably, who knows, later on down the line, maybe they never meet. But, I don't know, maybe on some level, this might be the end of their life. That's the only lives that they have. But I'd like to believe that maybe somehow they're spit back out, like in this system of souls of reincarnation. It's like a giant cog machine, and maybe, like, their souls were like return to the ether or whatever, but then maybe somewhere down the line their souls get spit back out into the reincarnation cycle. I'd like to think that, like, but for this to be the end, like, yeah, you want to get, I mean, once again, it's like, it's their lives, they're not really going to know, but for, like, their souls to not go on, I'm sure Nancy kind of, you know, it's kind of sad that kind of end, the buck stops with, like, her and Ace, like, you know, any versions of you in the past, like, kind of go along with you, but, you know, all you truly know is yourself. And especially Nancy having a peek at who she was in a previous life, doesn't really want to go down that route, but she does want to take the time to make up for that, to try and do good. So, I mean, it's sad because in Horseshoe Bay, at the same time this is all happening, like, with Horseshoe Bay, the town gathered, and one of its past sins was gathering together. Well, I think it might have been one particular person's sin, but it's the collective town sin, because when Callie did what she did, it was just kind of like a mass, like, every sin that this town has ever, like, committed is kind of being, like, thrown out there, so everyone's subjugated to it, and everyone got caught in the fever of burning a witch, because apparently they burned a witch here, and they kind of saw best as that. It's like, right, with everything Callie had kind of been doing about setting up the town against, like, the supernatural and against Bess, it was only a matter of time for things to kind of play out this way. So when it's all said and done, they show up to burn the place down, and Nick jumps in front of this to block them and, like, no, this is my family, I'm not let you hurt them, because this town means too much. Because for him, it's like, he's willing to go so far for this town because this town was his second chance. This town became his home. It gave him a new footing when he was lost after everything he had been through. This town gave him a new start, and he's so grateful for it, so he was going to fight for it, and fight for the town that his friends lived in. But obviously, sadly, the historical side, it gets burnt down. It's like, Nick wanted to rush back in there, but the others stopped him. It's like, and that's being like, you don't owe this town anymore. Like, you've done more than enough to give back to this town in so many different ways because of what this town's done for you. And it's like, you've done good. And Nick's like, no, we did good, because the Historical Society's been at the center of a lot of what the Drew crew has solved over the course of the show. So it's like, it's the ending of an era in so many capacities. Like, yeah, I mean, especially for Bets, it's like, yeah, I'm supposed to be in charge of this. That was taken from me. And all the time I tried to get it back, and now it's burnt down. But it's like, right, we're still alive and we still kind of carry on that torch, so it's not completely gone. We even find out later on from Addie that Sheriff Lovett, whatever survived the fire, she had transported to the underground Historical Society. So they didn't really talk about it too much, but it does, I guess that is up and atom and it's active, and they're just going to have to build from the ground up. And I guess going forward, like, I don't know if the Historical Society will ever be, like, above ground like it was. Like, I don't know if they mean, like, literally, like, it's an underground facility, or whether they're just like, okay, it's in an undisclosed location so people don't try and pull, like, a Cali again or something, you know? But it is just really, like, once again, that beautiful yet heartbreaking aspect of it all, of just kind of the chapters closing and everyone kind of going their separate ways. George, obviously she had her interview, but it's like, right, I don't fit the typical applicant. I don't have the 4.02 GPA. I don't have this. I don't have that. All I've done is I work so many hours a day. I've kind of run my own business, and I spend the other time like studying law. And if I'm not good enough for your school, it's like, well, your school's not good enough for me. But all of that got her applied to the school, you know? I even love that line from, she's like, oh, it kills me that I'm going to have to abandon. She's like, no, yeah, yet you're still alive abandoning me anyway. And George was almost like, okay, Bess, because Bess is taking this the hardest the moment she found out, oh, Nick's like, yeah, like, this trip with Jade is also to see, like, hey, if there's any place out there I want to be able to live someday. She was like, wait, you're leaving too? Because for Bess, it's like, obviously we know her situation with the Marvins being what it is. Like, she only has this group as a family, which, you know, everyone else, each of them sees this group as a family too. The Drew crew as a family. And so for her, it's like, oh, like all of a sudden everyone's leaving. I'm going to be the one left. You know, when it's all said and done, she's wishing everyone well on their respective journeys. And I love that whole situation of them all looking at her and George being like, yeah, we just expected you to cry. She's like, oh no, I cried already. I cried a lot. But she's like, I'll just cast like a spell. You know, I'll find like 7 or so different spells that will kind of force us to come back together. You know, at least one of them have to work. I'm like, I love how you cope with this situation, Bess. It's like, no, like my family is going separate ways, and I'm gonna miss you guys, because regardless of the complications, they've been like so tightly bound over the course of this show that they could always get in contact. Like, yeah, she can call them, but like being able to see each other on a regular basis has been like a core aspect for this group for so long, that it's like, now that's kind of changing. Like, life is changing, and you know, life moves on, and nothing stays the same forever. But that doesn't mean that the group won't like find its way back to each other every once in a while. And I just thought that was so beautiful. I mean, Ryan, you know, Red won't be staying and she'll be going on adventures, but she's going to end up dragging Ryan away to kind of go on adventures from time to time too. But obviously, like, Horseshoe Bay's still going to be, like, I think his fundamental home. So I think obviously he's going to probably be around. I'd like to think that he's going to be around to play second father to Gene and Carson's kid. Probably even just be like probably a godparent type of situation. I can see that being the situation. I even love Nancy's gift to him being like a little like cat, because she's like, always, I know I've never admitted this, but I've always wanted to be a big sister. So it's like, right, hopefully you don't end up having another sleuth in the family, but here's a little, you know, a little version of her or not Beanie, but or maybe Beanie would, like, her kind of signature little cap that she wears. So I was like, oh, that's super cute. Nick apparently ended up getting a job at Tom Swift's company and stuff, and even Jade ended up getting a like internship at like I'm assuming the person they were referencing, because I only saw like maybe part of the first episode of Tom Swift. I didn't really watch a lot of it, so I could be mistaken, but I want to say it was like Ashley Murray's character. It's like, oh, like, because she was the PR person, if I remember correctly. So it's like, yeah, I kind of got her an internship there. So it's like, oh, that Tom Swift connected like works out. I mean, especially because Nick is kind of like, hey, like, I'm gonna be able to kind of work on a lot of my inventions that I kind of like help make over the course of the show. You know, some of the stuff we kind of slapped together and put together for the sake of like, you know, fighting the things we've come across over the course of this series. So even Ace is apparently going to go to like medical school and kind of like chosen a path, because he apparently went to North Carolina to see Alice's family, kind of go to her memorial and tell them like, okay, I was the last person with your daughter before she died, and kind of, I think, able to give them some form of closure, I guess, about, you know, what happened and everything, and believe, you know, thinking that, I think she found peace and believing that she found peace. Nancy is planning on, once again, going out there and correcting the mistakes of her past. Her and Tristan kind of go their separate ways, because it's like, right, without, he was happy when he thought we were like soulmates, like we were always bound together, but he's also like, at the end of the day, there is someone out there you know, you obviously really love, but you've given me something better than love. You gave me my freedom. Because of that sonic boom at the very end, from the supernova of the Sin Eater, he can actually now, because of the state of his soul, like he can now go and leave town. So literally everyone's kind of going, like, obviously Carson, it makes sense why he'd stick around, and so the same situation with Bess. Bess is going to try and recoup a lot of what they lost. She's going to like probably leave town maybe every once in a while, but probably more likely order from places and probably get Ryan's help, most likely, to kind of get a lot of the object, or like kind of replenish their stock for like supernatural artifacts and stuff like that was lost, that's, you know, to compensate for what they lost in the fire. So, but this is the only, back to it, this is the only life that they have left, Ace and Nancy, and he doesn't want to have any regrets. So Ace, he's, you know, going to so many like supernatural experts to seem like, and he even noticed it himself before they came back, that like, right, the curse, because he's like, there's no way Temperance, yeah, she might have had contingencies in place for so many other things, but even she couldn't have prepared for something like that. And for Nancy, she was kind of, it's like, right, you broke my heart before, like, how do I know? But it's like, he's like, yeah, because I'm not going to let fear dictate, like, you know, I'm not going to let fear be the reason that kind of hold me back anymore. Like, that's why he broke her heart in the first place, was out of fear of what, you know, what could happen, and just like keep going. And Nancy, because he had even told Tristan this, that Nancy is the person who will jump right into the fire. She will sting full force ahead for the people she cares about. That's who she is, without any consideration for what might happen to her. So, and especially it's coming at the worst time, because Nancy's like, why are you doing, like, I'm literally leaving town, like there's no like place for, but it's like, yeah, but kind of like know where like she goes, like they will always be connected, like forever, you know. And so for him, it was like, we might as well take this leap. And it's like, are you afraid? And it's like, yeah, but she's like, I've never let that stop me before. And they kiss, and I love Ace looking up and pausing like, okay, yeah, and they kind of laugh and kiss some more, and it's like, it's really beautiful. It's like, okay, so it does happen in the end. Once again, I wasn't expecting the pairings to be what it was. The Bess and Addie thing, I'm glad that stayed through all the way through, because that would have been sucky if like, because once again, I'm happy that, you know, George kind of has someone, but, you know, obviously we don't know what that means long term, but it's like, that's not the point. Like, they all kind of pair up and have their people at the end of it all. Nick is with Jade. Maybe that'll last for a while. Maybe it'll last for, I don't know. Once again, I'm just kind of bummed, because I really like Nick and George together. I'm just so bummed of like, I wonder, were they originally going to make it so they would have gotten back together, or was the plan, even if they had gotten like, even if like, okay, this fourth season wasn't the final season, and the fifth, they would have gotten a fifth season, I'm curious what the story would have been if this wasn't the final season, and how much of that would have been like, especially like some of the relationship pairings. I mean, once again, Ace and Nancy still worked out in the end, so I'm happy about that. But I'm just like, I really like the George and Nick relationship, so I'm bummed that things didn't work out that way. I mean, life's funny. You never know how it might all work out. Like, they might find their way back to each other. Maybe they won't. You never know. But it feels weird being like, considering their current relationships, for me to be like, hey, they should, I hope they get together in the future. It feels a little weird, but I'm also like a little hopeful for that. But you never know how things are going to play out in the world. But them all kind of like packing up and saying goodbye. And there was that line from Nancy, which I was like, that's such a beautiful line of just like, right, when it comes to soulmates, it's like, you know, finding a way to kind of go on when you've kind of lost your soulmate. But even then, it's like, maybe you don't just get one soulmate in life. It's kind of, and Nancy was like, my dad was right because I got 4. I was like, oh, Nick. It wasn't even just about Ace, it's about Nick and George and Bess. It's like, once again, it's like, these are the people I love who are my ride or dies, and I think that's so beautiful. And it's like them leaving everything at the claw, and you know, it's like for the next people who come through there, who might be in that, like the next generation, because you're gonna always like, I mean, it's one of those interesting things where like this series could get rebooted like years down the road, and like a new crew is kind of taking over in Horseshoe Bay. Like you could get like recurring characters. Like I don't think you don't have to necessarily be like, oh man, this is like Ace and Nancy's kid or something like that. It's like, it doesn't have to necessarily be like that, but it could be someone else filling those shoes. But it feels weird considering it's like, well, it's Nancy Drew. Not unless it's a situation of, oh, it ends up being her kid. So it most likely would have to be like if you were to reboot it. But if you were to like continue the continuity but reboot the series in that regard of like, oh yeah, it's like years down the road, and like you get like this crew is like older and they kind of pop in and help out type of situation, like for the next generation of investigators. And you know, you could always do something like that. I don't think, I highly doubt that it ever happened, but it's out there for it, and it's a potentiality that could happen. Not necessarily means it ever would, but I don't know, it's just kind of like a thought, because I never want anything to end, and it's just sad for this to be the last time. It just, I hate like just being like, man, it's over, like this is the end, before the end on such a beautiful notion of just like oh, last one out turns off the light, and George had paused for a second, and Nancy was like, don't worry, I got it. And her being the one looking back, you know, leaving her name tag behind, taking the tape off her locker, you know, it's just, it's beautiful, dude. Like them all kind of saying goodbye, like they had a final like gathering and hugging, and just all walking out one by one, because this place has been fundamental to each and every one of them. And obviously it means the most to George. It's foundational for Nick, because it played a role in his second chance and things, and it's just been fundamental, and it's been part of the journey for like Ace, Bess, and Nancy as well. So this place means so much. I mean, it was their main headquarters that they would meet up at the most. It's like where they convene, and it's where the most stuff is kind of going down over the course of the show. It's where they concocted their plans. It's where they've investigated. It's just this play. It's so symbolic of this is the end, you know, saying goodbye, you know, as they all kind of go their separate ways, you know. Once again, it's just like her adventures are going to continue, because she was even saying like, as I investigate out there, I'll always carry Horseshoe Bay with me. There'll always be a piece of Horseshoe Bay with me when I'm out there kind of investigating this other stuff. And so even though they're going their separate ways, they're always going to be bound together, and I think they will find time to meet up. It's not like this is goodbye forever. We just won't be seeing each other as much, but I think our life paths are going 5 different ways, but I think there's going to be a lot of convergence along that way from time to time, and I think that's beautiful. So I thought it was just kind of like a nice like resolution to everything, solving a lot of these mysteries, kind of putting a pin in everything, and then just kind of everyone going their separate ways and their storylines closing out. And just a beautiful way to close out the show. So to everyone involved with the show, cast and crew, everyone in front of the camera, behind the cameras, the actors, the writers, I want to, you know, the directors, the all the technical staff, like the gaffers, the lighting people, camera people, like everyone who played a part in making the show. I want to elaborate on that every time when I specifically talk about cast and crew, about who do the show. And yes, some producers, like, you know, you have to give credit, like those who are like hands-on, who are, some producers I think are like, I will have a better opinion of than others, of just like, because you think of like the producers and the big time people who make a whole bunch of money, who don't, you know, aren't really as in tune with the creative process, but there are producers who are like hands-on with a lot of this stuff too. So you always have to give those people credit too, because those producers help make stuff too. Not just the people like, yeah, who like, greenlight it, that's it. There's other people who are producers who are a lot more hands-on. So got to give shout outs to those people. So, but like I said, to everyone involved in this show, I wish them the best in their future endeavors. And like always, kind of wrapping this up by saying, to the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good